On FGO's 3000 day anniversary, we will be receiving a 4-star servant selector ticket, allowing you to virtually claim a single SR servant for free. As many other FGO content creators have done, I will be making a tier list, but this one is mostly catered towards 90++ farming. So who am I? I have done composition research and calculations for all 90++ levels in the global server of FGO since they came out. In preparation for making this, I've also reviewed the compositions featured in Edamitsu's 90++ document for all the future farming compositions on the most farm-heavy events. This does not cover all of the known future 90++ compositions, unfortunately, because that's a little bit too much work. A full image of my tier list will be available after this slide and at the end of this video, and a link to Edamitsu's 90++ document will be available in the description. Here's the tier list. The tier list is primarily divided into servants who have a memorable 90++ use case and the servants who have not. Servants who have not been featured in a previous 90++ composition, but who are in Edamitsu's 90++ document will be included in the upper bracket. The tier list will then be further subdivided into high, mid, and low priorities, and then finally a distinction will be made between getting your first copy of a servant, your NP1 copy, or raising the NP level of a servant you already own. More on that later. We start with the top of my tier list. An important thing to learn about how to read this tier list is that just because Summer Wu is placed on top here, does not mean she's automatically the better pick. What this means is getting your first copy of her will be very impactful, but gaining additional copies of Creamhild or Summer Heiress in order to raise the NP level of a copy that you already have would also be an excellent choice. For example, if you had none of these servants here, Summer Wu would overall be the best choice here, but if you had a few copies of Creamhild or Summer Heiress, then getting additional copies of either of them for the sake of raising their NP level would also be an excellent choice. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about these servants individually. Summer Wu is one of the best SR supports in the entire game, providing the team with a 20% NP battery, as well as a range of damage buffs that Buster servants can take advantage of. Usually, when you run an SR support in a 90++ composition, it is because the rest of the team functions well enough that you can use a weaker servant and still accomplish the 3-turn clear. But what Summer Wu provides to the team is simple and substantial enough that she is often integral to the team functioning, not as a substitute, but as a core support unit. Creamhild and Summer Heiress both share similar roles, being single target arts DPSs. They are different in some aspects that lend them to being used in different compositions, but overall they each have many use cases. In my opinion, if you are going to pick between them, get the one which will bring you closer to NP level 3. The mid-tier are servants who have been in a few 90++ compositions, and I believe have the potential to be used in future ones as well, although not as potent as the 3 servants I featured a while ago. Helena is like Summer Wu. She provides the team with a 20% NP battery, but her damage buffs, while being more universal, are also weaker. She can also charge her own NP by an additional 30% for a total of 50%, but her NP damage is a little bit on the weaker side, even at NP 5. Nitocris relies on instant death, meaning her NP damage is mostly irrelevant. Combine that with her 100% NP battery, makes her very useful when instant death is viable. Caster Gil provides multiple relevant arts buffs like the 20% NP charge, damage, and NP generation. A very simple but helpful support. Melt has a great NP refund, but her selfish NP battery can make her a bit tricky to use. Babanshi or Sith has a 60% battery, that's very good, as well as a decent range of damage buffs for herself. Cersei has a 100% battery and some decent damage buffs as well. And finally, Hephaestus is a servant who features in future 90++ events and also has a 100% battery and the Pretender class, making her fairly versatile. Finally, in the lowest tier are servants who have shown up in 90++ farming, but in my opinion, it is very unlikely that they will show up in future compositions. Landling is also used as a substitute to SSR buffers when possible, but in my opinion this is very rare and I won't count on this happening too often. Raiko provides the best buster damage buff among all SR units, but she doesn't provide any charge at all, so this makes her significantly more niche to use than Summer Wu. The rest of the DPS servants here are more or less have the same story. They had very many conditions aligned to enable them to be a part of 90++ farming, but in my opinion these are too rare and I wouldn't count on it happening again. For example, Pent's anti-trait of anti-Greek male is highly specific, and in my opinion it is not worth spending your SR ticket to wait for these stars to align to allow these servants to be relevant. So on to the bottom half of the tier list. Everyone here, so far, has not been in a 90++ composition, or at least none that are memorable enough for me. There may be an edge case where one of these servants is giga buffed with grails, but I'm not gonna cover that. None of these servants have a precedent for appearing in 90++ farming, but some of them I believe have potential. Things like NP charge, NP refund, attack buffs, defense downs, and strong anti-traits are things that I look for when determining if a servant might have potential for future 90++ nodes. Servants in the high tier would not surprise me if they were to appear in a composition, and to me it is just a matter of time for enough factors to line up for one of them to have a use case. For example, Astolfo has a 50% battery, and Summer MHX has pretty good attack buffs with very strong anti-trait. The mid tier and the low tier are servants who in my opinion are highly unlikely to appear in 90++ farming. The difference being is that the mid tier servants at least have some sort of NP battery. But everyone in the low tier completely lacks any sort of battery, and in my opinion that is almost essential for 90++ farming. And finally, I have the special tier, because if I were to judge purely based on 90++ farming, these servants here would have fallen into fairly low tiers. But then they would be grouped with other servants who in my opinion are significantly less useful. Because of this, I am making some allowances for them and to highlight their strengths even if they aren't all applicable to 90++ farming. Chiron is probably never going to be in a 90++ composition because he doesn't have a battery buff, but his rainbow buff is fairly substantial. Summer Mordred's damage is probably too low to ever be useful in 90++, despite her having good refund and a 30% battery. But she is excellent for farming the daily doors node, which is something that every FGO player has to do a little bit of. Wu Zetian has the most potent quick damage buff on a SR servant, but without a battery skill she will probably never be in a 90++ composition. Heracles is the meme. He has a ton of survivability with his Bond CE, and while it takes a while to get to it, but if you can eventually, why not? A lot of people rate Estrella very highly, and I can see why. She is a very solid performer in general combat. If FGO's meta did revolve around min-turn farming, I could see her being pretty valuable. But because that isn't the case, I can only really vouch for her in this special category. Lobo is here because of a technicality. He can be used in 90++ farming, but you are literally only using him for his death resist down skill when you are using insta-kill compositions. And you would be using him with a plug suit instead of just using the Soya High Mystic code. This kinda defeats the advantage of saving time and not using a servant swap skill, and she takes away one of your free servant slots, so it is only a downgrade. He is here because of a technicality, and it is a bad one at that. Anyways, one last time, here is the entire servant tier list. I'll leave it here for a few more seconds, and that is the end of this video.